can you, or can you?
Yes.
You can.
Yes.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Is that, okay.
Looks great.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hi, Jim.
Hey, good morning, Elizabeth. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Oh, I should have
Jim.
made me a cup of coffee before I.
Hey, Tom.
It's Tom Barrett.
Hey, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Looking forward to this.
Hey, Samir, when you record these things, what do you do with them?
Well, if you're okay with it, I put it on the eonashville.com/united site. There's a little section for recordings, but if you'd rather me not put it out for all the world
No,
to see.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we produce this content. I mean, to give people more ways to see it is absolutely a good thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people watch these recordings later because, you know, they just are
Right.
fighting
right,
a good fight all day with their hair on fire and don't have time to
Mm-hmm,
call.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And
Right.
it's also, we're really going to reach out to our prospective future EO members and make sure they know about all these resources so that, you
Yeah.
know, keep
Yeah.
their business alive.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea.
So we had 25 people sign up. You know, not everybody is signing up through the global site for these things. So there could be more, there
Right.
could be less, you never know. But I think we'll give it a few minutes and let a few
That's
people
fine.
join.
I have been in a lot of Zoom meetings, as everybody has the past 6 weeks, and I think a lot of them go on too long. It's almost like people almost forget that. I mean, I don't know. I've gotten very time conscious about these things. So this is pretty tight.
Perfect. Yeah, sometimes people will jump before Q&A, or I think it's
Right.
been good to kind of get through the presentation and then open it for Q&A. And if you need to jump, jump. And if you want to stay and ask more, you do.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
How are
Hey,
you?
Brittany.
Let's give it just maybe one more minute.
That's fine.
And I'll introduce you. Not that everybody doesn't already know you, but just to
Make
be
it short.
legit
Make it
as
short.
we can be. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, I will start with my super snazzy introduction of Mr. Jim Cumbee. In case there are a few of you out there that have not had the pleasure of meeting this fine gentleman. We did an event with him, I guess it was about a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months, on a very similar topic, and it was very well received. So wanted to bring him back. He's been a strategic alliance partner for many years, and just in case you did not know, he is an attorney, a transition mediator, and a business broker. He's also been a buyer, a seller, and an entrepreneur himself, so he is uniquely qualified to really share some really great experience with you guys. He's put a lot of time and effort into not only this presentation, but just over the past years, just tons of amazing content that has been just extremely helpful to all of our members. So without further ado, I will let Jim take it away.
Thank you, Samira. You read off my script just perfectly. I really appreciate that introduction. I got an email about 3 weeks ago from an EO member with this question. How do the events of 2020 affect my business valuation and my strategy to sell it over the next 2 years? And I hadn't thought about this topic until I got this email, and I realized that I kind of felt like it was too early to really try to put some meat on these bones, but I really began to feel like a lot of people were probably asking this question. So I developed this presentation. I should tell you before I start, I've probably interviewed about 50 people to develop this. I really wanted to kind of be proactive and not just kind of give you the benefit of my opinion. So I've gone out and synthesized a lot of information. This is going to be the least flashy presentation you've probably seen. I didn't put any time into trying to make this thing sexy or fun or cool. I just wanted to give you information. You all recognize Jack Webb, one of my favorite TV shows, Dragnet. You remember he was famous for the phrase, just the facts, man. People would kind of go off on all these tangents, and he would always say, just the facts, man. So that's kind of the spirit by which I developed this presentation today. We're going to cover 3 things. By the way, there are 14 slides in here. This is a reasonably short presentation because I know you all have been overwhelmed with Zoom meetings and webinars. I want to just give you a lot of solid content. What's going on in the market? How's this affecting valuations? And very specific things you can do now. So let's start with what is the market for private companies today? Well, as you can imagine, it's good news and it's bad news. Let's start with the good news. Private equity is still looking. They still have a lot of money on the sidelines. I'm going to say a lot of money, I mean in the trillions, in the T's. So they're still looking. I probably get 3 to 4 emails a day from private equity saying, hey, what do you have? What's new? I talk with private equity every day about existing clients. So this buyer class is not going away. They're every bit as active now as they were prior to this crisis. At the same time, strategics are still very active. And the fundamental driver of strategic acquisition is growth through acquisition is faster than organic growth. And that's not going to change. So strategics are still out there. And the other piece of good news is interest rates will remain low. I could go off and give you a whole explanation of what's going on in the Fed and what's happening in the bond market and how that will affect interest rates, but I'll spare you that and just tell you that the Fed has to keep interest rates low given the size of the deficit that has been created to accommodate this pandemic. So interest rates will stay low. So that's all the good news about the private market today. Well, what's the bad news? Okay, the shell shock of this event has led to fear. And what does fear lead to? Fear leads to risk mitigation. And you all know that. That's just natural. You wouldn't expect any other reality. But what has that resulted in? Well, first of all, it's been an interesting shift in the past 6 weeks to go from a seller's market to a buyer's market. And I can explain specifically why that is, but let's just take it for now. We'll keep going through this presentation, but we're going to come back to how it has morphed to a buyer's market. Valuations are a moving target. Now I'm going to talk about valuations in a second specifically, but when I say it's a moving target, I mean a lot of deals will be priced very, very late in the due diligence process. The days of getting a price up front, excuse me, then moving through due diligence and closing are maybe behind us. Valuations will be a moving target until the point of due diligence is over. Having said that, due diligence will be more extensive. And I say that in 3 respects. Due diligence used to be pretty much your financial evaluation. You've heard the phrase quality of earnings, and you know about organizational due diligence. Buyers want to look at your organization, your team, your structure, but now they're going to be looking much more holistically at your customers, your supply chain, and the resiliency of your business model. And the final piece of bad news, getting around the bases will take longer. Now let me explain to you what I mean by that. think of let's use baseball as a metaphor. Coming to the plate in my world means a business owner looks at their exit objectives, how much they want, when they want to sell, they select their advisors, and then that advisor helps them prepare business profile and marketing materials. That's in my metaphor, that's coming to the plate. Now you get to first base when you then prepare your prospective buyer target list and you start discussions with those buyers. You get to second base once you've concluded those exploratory buyer discussions and you've started specific negotiations with a specific buyer, and that culminates in a letter of intent. Okay, third base in my world is when you've started due diligence, you're preparing the legal documentation, and you're beginning to effectuate HR integration. Getting back to home plate is closing and then integration. Now that's my world using the baseball metaphor. Well, when I say we're stuck on second base, I'm saying right now my client base, I've got a very good set of clients right now, but we're all kind of at this point. We've concluded exploratory discussions. We're having specific buyer conversations now, and we're on the precipice of signing letters of intent. But not much is going to happen past this point until such time as when I say the fog is lifted. So that's what I mean, we're sort of stuck on second base. But a lot can happen in terms of coming to the plate and getting on first base and getting to second base that you can be doing now. Now, everybody wants to know about valuations. And those of you that know me or have seen my presentations before, you know, I talk about EBIT, there are quantitative factors of valuation, and there are qualitative factors of valuation. The quantitative factors relate to EBITDA and multiples, and the qualitative factors come down to the 7 principles of irresistibility, which is what I wrote the book about. Now, here's what's happening with EBITDA. You all, if you've heard my presentation before, you all know what EBITDA is: earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. EBITDA in the world of buying and selling companies is sort of a proxy for cash flow. But there's now a new phrase that you need to get familiar with: EBITDAC. Earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, and coronavirus. All right. Now, when you go to sell your business in 2020 or 2021 or even 2022, the pre-coronavirus EBITDA will be your baseline. All right. And your coronavirus affected EBITDA will be ignored, and I put ignored in quotes. Nothing's ever ignored, but let me just say, it'll be, you can look beyond your 2020 EBITDA if you can prove pacing back toward your baseline year. So let's just play for an example. Let's say the fog of this thing lifts in Q3. And in Q4, you begin to show that you're getting back to where you were in Q4 of 2019. Going into 2021, your 2019 baseline would be how your EBITDA would be, kind of would be the factor used in your valuation. So that's why I put ignored in quotation marks. Okay. Now, you all have seen this chart before, but I think most of you have. How multiples are calculated. You know, the vertical axis is revenue growth. The horizontal axis is profit margin. Where you fall in this, the kind of a matrix between your profit margin and your revenue growth determines what your multiple will be at exit. So in the upper right-hand box, a 7x multiple means your revenue growth is high and your profit margins are high. Pretty intuitive, nothing that you didn't really know there. Well, these multiples are changing in this sense. Most buyers I talk to say they're looking at about a 10% effect of valuations. And that could change if the crisis gets worse. But in today's environment, expecting that we kind of unwind from this thing in the midst, sometime during Q3 and Q4, we kind of get back on track. That as the world is, we look at it now, they see a 10% change in multiples. But I need to introduce to you what I call a dinosaur. The dinosaur is called cash at close. I think it's going to be a long time before we see cash at close again. So as you go into a sale in the next couple of years, don't expect it to be an all cash at close deal. Now, what I mean by that is you're going to expect terms. And there are three kind of terms: earnouts, holdbacks, and seller financing. And earnouts and holdbacks are sort of the same thing, except earnouts is the phrase used when you, the seller, stay with the company and you are effectively earning out more purchase price over time. A holdback is when money is reserved. It may even be put in escrow, and that is held back in anticipation of reaching certain metrics, and then the money's released to you. So almost think of earnouts as if you stay, holdbacks or if you don't stay. And then of course, seller financing, you know what that means. And that'll become more relevant because banks will be more judicious in their terms than they have been. So seller financing will become more important going forward. So that's multiples. Now, here you are. You've all seen, hopefully most of you have heard the presentation before when I talk about the qualitative factors. So the qualitative factors a buyer looks at are not changing, and if any, well, and these become more important. The diversity of your customer base, the sustainability of your revenue stream, the reliability of your financial statements, the scalability of your business, the unique market position, the independence the business has from you, the owner, and the believability of your growth story. These issues will become even more pronounced going forward. And I'm going to introduce an eighth. I don't have the pithy way of saying that, but I'm going to introduce an eighth factor for you. How has COVID revealed the fragility of your business model? Everybody knows that COVID, well, by the way, a little side note here. In my conversations, I've sort of concluded that about a third of the companies in America are not affected by COVID or have been even positively affected. You know, we know Netflix has been positively affected. We know Amazon has been positively affected. But about 2/3 of the businesses are presumed to have some negative effect from COVID. So having a negative effect is one thing, but how has that negative effect revealed the fragility of your business model would be a question that you will be asked. Now, let me give you some very specific things you can be doing now if you want to sell the next couple of years. Go ahead and get your 2019 financials audited or reviewed. Get ahead of the curve. Do it now so that when you're ready to go to market, you've already got this behind you. And by the way, I have never had a business, never have I had a business owner that didn't do this and come back and say they learned something about their business that they didn't know. So you should be doing this anyway, frankly. And I'm not pitching for our SAPs that do accounting, although I could be pitching for them because this is really important work that you need to get done. Be very specific about documenting the COVID-related impacts to your financials. I think that don't assume it's going to be intuitive to a buyer. If you have an AR write-off, you know, almost like keep a list, just a running list of things that COVID has done to affect your business model. If you have a legal fee to fill out an SBA form, make a note of that. If you have increased accounting fees to deal with, you know, some of the PPP paperwork, make a note of that. If you've had an increase of your supply chain, make a note of that. If you've had to offer discounts to maybe foster some increased revenue, make a note of that. If you've had an AR write-off, make a note of that. Document anything that is kind of related to the times so that you can go back and essentially when we're doing add backs, we can have COVID related add backs. Now, the other thing I'd recommend is start thinking about who your buyer is going to be. And I want to kind of help you think about it this way. Think about your competitors on a horizontal scale. They are, it's horizontal integration, if you will. If you buy a competitor buys you, they're buying into your products, into your markets. Okay, and think about your competitors, large and small. But those are also this concept known as vertical integration, and this runs from your customers to your suppliers. Now, think of yourself as in the middle of this matrix, and just begin to write down, just have kind of a running list. Who are your competitors, large and small? Who are your key suppliers? And who are your key customers, large and small? And you will begin to see potential buyers emerge from this list. And almost every strategic acquisition I have orchestrated over the past 5 or 6 years, the buyer would have ended up on this chart. So I really encourage you to go ahead and kind of get ahead of this and start doing this work now, because it'll help you just kind of crystallize your thinking about who your potential buyers are. Let me, I want to rephrase this chart, by the way. I'm not going to call it things you can do now. I'm going to call it things you should do now. Talked about financials, talked about COVID impacts, talked about strategic buyer research. Stress test your supply chain. Is your supply chain diversified? What is the financial health of your suppliers? These are questions buyers are going to ask, so go ahead and get ahead of the curve. Prepare monthly sources and uses of cash statements. I don't know many businesses that do sources and uses cash statements. If you have your credentials reviewed or audited, they would be done. But these are something that you should start doing on a monthly basis. And again, your accountant can help you with this if you don't know how. It's a very easy structure to set up. It's very easy to do once you have the template in place. But it really kind of helps you understand where your cash is coming from, how you're using your cash, and buyers are going to want to see it. So go ahead and start it now. And design your growth strategy. And this is probably the biggest flaw I see with businesses when I go to market. They don't really have a good growth strategy. So I want to give you a way to think about how to design your growth strategy. Okay, your business today, your existing products or services in existing markets, that's your business today, right? No, not hard to figure out. Well, there's only 2 ways to grow. You can add products, or you can sell into new markets, right? So think about your growth. You should literally produce this chart and start jotting down ways to grow on a chart like this. And here's how you do it. You can take your existing markets and sell more products or services to that existing market. Or you can take your existing products and services into new markets. Or you can design new products and services for new markets. Now, folks, that's growth. I can complicate that. You can get consultants that can complicate that, but that is growth strategy 101. And that's how buyers talk. They talk about products and services, and they talk about markets. So put your growth strategy into this nomenclature, and you will be way ahead of the game. And even to the point where when you sit down with a buyer, you could literally have a chart like this and walk that buyer through your thinking. Now, I'm not saying you have to have the ROI figured out on every element of growth, but in terms of helping the buyer think about ways to effectuate growth, this will help that buyer get there. So, last thing I'm going to talk, just a summary, I'm done. Get your financials reviewed or audited, document your COVID impacts, do strategic buyer research, stress test your supply chain, prepare monthly sources and uses of cash statements, and design a growth strategy. Now, you all have seen these letters. They describe, or they're kind of a benchmark for how to think about the recovery. Will the recovery be a V? Will it be a quick bounce back? A lot of people think it's going to be a W. They think there's going to be a quick bounce back and another decline with another quick bounce back. A lot of folks think it's going to be a U recovery, which means we're going to be into a decline for a while and then it'll sort of ease back up. Some folks think it's going to be an L recovery. An L recovery is what you don't want. An L recovery means we're going to be in a decline for a long time. I don't know. I'm not an economist about, and even the economists don't know, so don't trust the economists. But irrespective of that, I do know this. You guys know Andy Grove, the founder of Intel. He wrote the book in 1999. Only the paranoid survive. Well, I would like for him to write. Is he still alive? I can't remember. I think he's still alive. I would change the topic of his book and say only the paranoid who do something about their paranoia survive. It's one thing to be paranoid. It's another thing to do something about your paranoia. And I think those that are proactive through this period of fear and uncertainty, who do something about it, are those that survive. So I told you this was going to be short, 24 minutes. That's all I got. I hope this is helpful. So I'll end there. Samir, do you want to open up for questions, or how do you want to take it from here? I'll do what you want to do. You're on mute, dear. Samir, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I'm happy to kind of facilitate questions. If you guys will just put them in the chat box, then we can kind of go that way. And John Rosen said Andy Grove died in 2016.
Oh, that makes me sad. So I think I'll write the book. And thanks, John. I appreciate that. I'll write the book and give him credit.
So you guys give us some questions. Let's get a little chat going on.
I'll give you some feedback. This is awesome. Thank you. I want to go do the exercises.
Yeah.
Thank you, Trailer. Anyone? All just lost in thought.
Well, you all know that you can call me or email me anytime. I'm happy to talk through this with you all.
I have a question or something.
Yes,
Can you hear
ma'am.
me?
Yes,
Yeah.
already.
I've met with Jim several times. I'm watching this from the point of view as if I were a buyer. And I wondered if you have any additional thoughts when we're looking at it from that point of view.
I'm sorry, say the last thing again. If what?
If a person is looking at it from the point of view of being a buyer versus a
Right.
seller, do you have any additional thoughts, or is that a whole different presentation?
No, well, I mean, all the principles I talk about are the same. You just kind of have to reverse them. If you're a buyer, the price you'll pay will be less. You'll expect terms. Your due diligence will be more thorough now than it was 8 weeks ago, right? I mean, it's literally all. I would take everything I talked about and just literally kind of flip it from the perspective of a buyer. Be more proactive about. Don't make an acquisition that doesn't have a good growth strategy. Don't make an acquisition. I mean, go back to the same qualitative factors that I talked about, in that one slide. Those are the questions you want to ask. So as I look at this, in fact, I just before I kind of finished this, I had it kind of written from the perspective if you want to buy or sell sometime in the next couple of years. I've had several EO members call me and say, hey, I'm going to be looking, keep me in mind kind of thing. So I think the principles are absolutely the same.
Okay, thank you.
Jim, we've got a few more questions about buying. John Rosen said they're interested in buying distressed businesses, perhaps owned by private equity. Any thoughts about how to learn about opportunities?
Buying from private equity is difficult because private equity tends to buy and sell within themselves. They don't they don't really deal with.
The turd stuck to her.
I'm sorry. So I think that the best way to buy a company, whether it's owned by private equity or whether it's owned by an individual, is to connect with the leadership of a company, and because they're going to tell you if they're for sale or not, and they're going to tell you if they're in trouble. But it's not like private equity is out advertising, hey, we've got these 6 companies, somebody come make bids on them.
Okay. And
Although it's funny, John, you'd asked that question. I got a call last night, exchanged emails last night with a private equity managing partner about some distress in their portfolio, and we're meeting next week. So we're having a Zoom call next week to talk about his portfolio. So your instincts are correct that there will be private equity sales, but I don't. I think it's going to be more of a kind of an anecdotal way of approaching it versus a structured way.
Yeah, well, Jim, what prompted the question is just yesterday I learned about quite a good size, like a $70 million toy company, which owns 5 or 6 brands, with everyone on the call is familiar with, which apparently is going to auction May 12th. And this is my industry, and I'd like to think that I sort of have my ear, that I'm out there listening and whatnot, and totally missed it. And then I've learned there's only one company so far is participating in the auction. So I'm not the only one that's missing it. I mean, there's a lot of household brands you all have heard of. And so I'm wondering, I mean, are there, and these are private equity owned, maybe hedge funds involved. I don't really understand all that stuff, but
yeah.
I mean, are there directories or central resources? I mean, way back in the day, I was advised talk to the lawyers and the accountants and whatever, but I mean, are there nowadays with the internet and with everything being so transparent? I mean, are there listings of businesses going to auction?
Well, there are some there are some services, almost like dating services, between private equity and people like me that have businesses to sell. There's one called Axial, AXIAL.net. That's pretty good. But it's not by any means comprehensive of all the opportunities out there. And usually, in my experience, John, when a private equity puts a company up for auction, they already know who the buyer is. They're going through a process to kind of mitigate their risk. But it's probably pre-wired. It's almost like a company going into Chapter 11. They've set it up for a certain conclusion before they start the process.
Jim, Don Griffin says, are you of the belief that you should wait a few years to sell if you're not forced to?
Yes. I would, Don. I if you didn't have to sell, it's going to be a weak market. So as I said, it's going to be a buyer's market for a couple of years. So if you don't have to sell, you shouldn't sell. I'm dealing with a business owner in Alabama. It's got a great business, 50 years old, doesn't have to sell, but he's just plain tired and is ready to go take a long vacation. So he's going to go ahead and go through with the sale of his company. And if he waited a year or two, he'd probably get a little bit better deal, but he's just ready to sell. He doesn't have to, but he's ready to. So, I would never force somebody to sell unless they really had a need to or really wanted to.
Bert Lyles asked, if multiples change, are they changing in both directions?
Well, remember what I said in the anecdotal research I have done. The belief is about a third of the businesses out there are positively affected by COVID. So almost by definition, those businesses would sell for more and maybe even get higher multiples. There's going to be the multiple swing can be positive or negative.
Okay. Rosemary Florin asked if you could say a little more about what you're seeing and expect to see from the buyer's due diligence efforts.
Well, it's going to be due diligence used to be in the good old days of 8 weeks ago. They would do really down and dirty quality of earnings analysis where it's just like a proctology exam of your financials. And they would spend time with your organization to learn about your people, the stability of your organization. But what I think the difference here, Rosemary, is, and it's all a function of scale. It's not like before this, they didn't look at your supply chain. They didn't look at your customers. But I think it's going to be a lot deeper. I think that you'll see a lot more analysis, a lot more time spent on the stability and financial diversification, the diversification of your customer base, the financial stability of your customer base, and the financial stability and diversification of your supply base, and just overall much more into and this, when I talk about the stability of your business model, buyers are going to want to know how did you react to this pandemic? How did you react to this crisis? And that really goes to underscore the resiliency of the business model. So I think they're just going to be asking maybe the same questions they were asking before, but they're just going to get into much more kind of depths of conversation about it. So that's what I was getting at.
Anyone else? Is Jim just that good and thorough?
Well, you guys know how to reach me. I love being able to help you all anyway, so always feel free to reach out with a call, a text, or an email, and I'm happy to continue the conversation.
Very good. All right. Well, I will, I'll put this recording up on the United site. It's just eonashville.com/United. So,
Great.
Jim, we're so grateful for your time and all your expertise. You are making a difference. We really appreciate
Thank you all, and God bless you, and wash your hands.
Thank
Okay.
you. You do the
See
same.
you all.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.